The royal world has just been shaken to its very core. Tom Bower, a man who has built his entire career on exposing secrets that the most powerful people would rather keep buried, has dropped a revelation so explosive and deeply personal that Prince Harry reportedly cannot keep himself together. I don't see how the Queen, who Harry described as vicious in his book and in the Apple interviews, could ever forgive him. I mean, you'd have to swallow an unbelievable amount of humble pie. This isn't just another palace feud. It's not another Netflix deal or a tabloid headline that disappears after 48 hours. What we're looking at here is something entirely different, something that cuts straight into the most guarded and vulnerable part of Harry's identity. And the silence coming out of Montecito right now, it's the loudest silence we've ever heard. Before we break all of this down. And believe me, there is a lot to unpack. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story is moving incredibly fast, and you won't want to miss a single update as it unfolds. We post every time something new emerges, and with this saga, that's practically every hour. Now let's get into it. First, we need to answer an important question. Who exactly is Tom Bower? And why does his voice carry so much weight? Some of you might be wondering why the entire royal establishment seems to tense up whenever this man speaks. The reason is simple. Tom Bower is not a gossip blogger. He isn't some random voice online pushing conspiracy theories from behind a keyboard. He is an investigative journalist with decades of experience behind him. Over the years, he has written meticulously researched biographies on some of the most powerful figures in British public life, including members of the royal family. His books don't just sell well. They reshape public perception. They force institutions to respond. They dominate headlines for months. And his track record matters a lot here. Because when Bower has dropped bombshells in the past, claims that initially sounded outrageous, claims people immediately dismissed or laughed off. Many of them eventually turned out to be true. Not just a few, many. So when Tom Bower starts talking about Lilibet, about Archie, about what might really be behind the carefully constructed image of the Sussex family, the world doesn't simply shrug it off. The world pauses, and it listens. That's exactly what's happening right now. His newest claims go far beyond anything he has suggested before, and they have reportedly sent shockwaves through Harry's world, shockwaves that are impossible to contain. According to sources close to Montecito, Harry has been completely destabilized, restless, pacing the floors, unable to sleep, obsessively scrolling through headlines late into the night, watching video after video, reading thread after thread. A man, reportedly standing right on the edge. But here's the question you should keep in the back of your mind as we go through everything in this story. If there was truly nothing to hide, why would this be the reaction? Now, let's talk about the claims that ignited this firestorm, because this is where things start getting very serious. For years, there have been quiet whispers circulating in certain corners of the internet about the births of Archie and Lilibet. Before you dismiss those whispers as fringe conspiracy theories, there's something important you need to understand. Those questions didn't begin with anonymous online accounts. They started with observable inconsistencies, gaps in timelines, missing documentation, the absence of traditional royal birth protocols, photographs that raised more questions than they answered. And then there's the Portland hospital story. Meghan's own description of how that birth unfolded has been analyzed and dissected repeatedly. Critics point to details that don't quite align, a timeline that seems inconsistent, a birth announcement that broke with nearly every established royal tradition surrounding new arrivals. Some critics argue that the confusion surrounding the birth date, time, and sequence of events wasn't accidental. They believe it was deliberate. Now Tom Bower isn't just reviving those whispers. He's pouring gasoline on them. According to him, this may involve a closely guarded royal secret, one that could have been hidden from the public from the very beginning. At the center of his claims is a question many people have considered too explosive to ask out loud. Was surrogacy involved in the births of Archie and Lilibet? And regardless of what you personally believe, that question alone has the potential to shake the monarchy to its foundations. Because the royal line of succession is not merely symbolic tradition, it's a legal and constitutional framework built entirely on biological lineage. It determines who carries the bloodline, who holds a legitimate claim, who can one day be recognized as part of the living history of the British crown. If there is even the slightest question, any question at all, about whether those biological ties exist exactly as Harry and Meghan have presented them, then it's not just their private lives that come under scrutiny. It's the constitutional validity of everything connected to their children's royal status. And that is not just gossip. That's a matter with national and institutional consequences. Royal commentators have been very direct about this. If the children were not born to Meghan and Harry in the traditional biological sense, they would not be eligible to hold a place in the royal line of succession. They must have royal blood. Without that, there is no legitimate claim, no meaningful title, no connection to the throne whatsoever. And that right there is ground zero for why this situation is exploding. Now let's talk about Harry, because his reaction to all of this, or more accurately, the reports emerging from Montecito about his current state of mind, may be just as revealing as anything Tom Bower has claimed. By multiple accounts, the man is falling apart. Sources describe an atmosphere inside the home that has shifted dramatically. The sun-drenched, peaceful California sanctuary we were shown in Netflix documentaries now reportedly feels tense, suffocating, and thick with anxiety. Staff, according to insiders, are walking on eggshells. The mood inside the house has turned heavy, dark. Harry is said to be pacing constantly, snapping at people, sleeping very little. In the early hours of the morning, he's glued to his phone, endlessly scrolling headlines, watching YouTube videos, analyzing every detail of his family's history, rereading forum threads where complete strangers dissect his life with almost forensic precision. Pause for a moment and really picture that. Here is a man who once stood on global stages speaking passionately about mental health. This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's reached this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's. This is someone who built an entire post-royal identity around healing, therapy, and emotional stability. The man who told Oprah that stepping away from royal life finally gave him peace. And yet now, that same man reportedly cannot switch off, cannot find calm, cannot stop watching as the world pulls apart the most personal details of his life. And that contrast raises a difficult question, one that you really have to sit with. Is this the reaction of someone simply frustrated by false rumors? Or is it the reaction of a man who knows that the truth may be far more complicated than what has been publicly admitted? Both possibilities exist, but only one of them explains why the silence surrounding this story has been so complete, so absolute, and so relentless. Even some of Harry's former military colleagues, men who once served alongside him and respected his discipline and sense of purpose, are reportedly beginning to distance themselves. They say they don't recognize him anymore. The man they remember was a soldier, focused, clear-headed, steady. What they're hearing described now sounds nothing like that version of Harry. And perhaps the cruelest irony in all of this is that fatherhood was supposed to be Harry's redemption story. In interviews in his memoir in the Netflix series, Harry repeatedly leaned into the idea that becoming a father gave him everything royal life had taken away: purpose, grounding, something real to fight for. Fatherhood was meant to be his safe place, his anchor. And now that very anchor is being dragged up from the seabed and examined under the harshest public spotlight imaginable: Meghan's calculated silence, and why it isn't working while Harry is reportedly unraveling under the pressure. Meghan appears to be taking an entirely different approach. Cool, controlled, strategic, silent. Sources claim she has entered full crisis management mode, and not the emotional, humanizing style she has used in the past. This time the response is colder, more calculated, backed heavily by legal muscle. Her team has reportedly been sending cease and desist letters to media outlets, issuing formal warnings, threatening defamation actions, and working phones and inboxes behind the scenes to shut down stories before they gain traction. But here's the deeply ironic part of that strategy. It isn't working. In fact, it may be making the situation worse. Every cease and desist letter that goes out quickly becomes its own news story. Every legal threat aimed at a journalist ends up reinforcing the public perception that someone is trying to hide something. Because if the allegations were simply false, clearly, provably, demonstrably false, the standard playbook wouldn't involve lawyers. The playbook would be transparency, documentation, evidence. You don't mobilize an entire legal team to silence a rumor that could be dismantled instantly with something as simple as a birth certificate. And that's the thought running through millions of minds right now. No amount of legal pressure can silence that question. The public who once celebrated Meghan for her supposed openness and honesty, the woman who sat across from Oprah and said she was finally telling her truth, are now watching her fight aggressively to prevent others from asking about theirs. That contradiction is hard to ignore, and social media certainly isn't ignoring it. Every retweeted thread, every viral TikTok breakdown analyzing clips frame by frame, every Reddit post comparing old pregnancy photos with medical timelines, all of it feeds a growing online machine that no public relations team, no matter how sophisticated, can fully control. But perhaps even more damaging than the rumors themselves is the visible difference in how the two of them appear to be handling the crisis. Harry reportedly looks raw and shaken. Meghan appears composed, strategic, and tightly controlled. Two people under the same roof, facing the same controversy, reacting in almost completely opposite ways. That doesn't project the image of a united front. And the world is noticing the palace's silence. And why it matters, there is one more piece of this story that deserves much more attention than it's receiving. Buckingham Palace has said absolutely nothing, not a single word, no official statement. No quiet background briefing to a sympathetic journalist, not even the subtle, carefully deniable signals the palace has historically used for centuries to guide the narrative. Just silence. And for a royal institution that has traditionally responded, even subtly, whenever its reputation is threatened, that silence is extraordinary. The palace regularly releases statements over far smaller issues. They correct minor inaccuracies, address tabloid speculation, and reaffirm royal protocol when necessary. But on this matter, nothing. And that silence raises an uncomfortable question. Why? There are really only two possible explanations, and both are unsettling in their own way. The first possibility is that the palace simply doesn't know what to say. The claims are serious enough that any response, whether it's a denial or a show of support, could trigger consequences they may not be able to control. The second possibility is even more troubling. The palace may already know something, and that very knowledge could be the reason they're keeping their distance. According to insiders, quiet conversations are reportedly taking place behind palace walls. These are not press briefings or media strategy sessions. They are crisis management meetings. Legal advisors, senior courtiers, trusted representatives of the royal family, all gathered together to discuss issues surrounding succession, bloodline, and what it would mean for the crown if certain claims were ever confirmed. Pause for a moment and think about the weight of that. One of the oldest and most enduring institutions in human history, the British monarchy, may now be holding private discussions about contingency plans involving whether Harry and Meghan's children are truly who the public has been told they are. If those reports are accurate and multiple sources suggest consistency, then this is no longer just gossip. This becomes an institutional crisis quietly unfolding in real time. And then there's another detail that cuts through the entire story. No birthday wishes. Not even the standard formulaic two-line message that the palace usually posts automatically for royal birthdays. When Lilibet's fourth birthday arrived, there was nothing from the senior royals. No message from King Charles. No acknowledgement from William and Catherine. Now compare that with how Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis are celebrated. Warm photographs, affectionate public messages, visible expressions of pride and love. The contrast couldn't be clearer, and the public has noticed. Ask yourself something. When a family appears to go out of its way to publicly ignore a child's existence, what does that usually suggest? The DNA test question. This brings us to what has now become the unavoidable question spreading across every platform. The DNA test. What was once dismissed as fringe speculation is now being discussed openly on national television. Respected commentators are addressing it. Royal historians are debating it. Even mainstream journalists, who would never have touched this topic 2 years ago, are now raising the issue. The logic being presented is simple. If the claims about Archie and Lilibet's biological origins are completely false, provably false, then a DNA test could end this entire story immediately, instantly, completely. The speculation disappears. The rumors collapse. Tabloids lose their angle. Conspiracy theories fall apart. The story would simply end. So the obvious question becomes, why hasn't that happened? For many observers, the silence surrounding that possibility has become the most troubling detail of all. Not because silence proves guilt, legally or logically, it does not. But in the court of public opinion, when the simplest solution to a damaging rumor exists and remains unused, people inevitably begin drawing their own conclusions. Some voices have gone even further. They argue that when it comes to royal succession, Harry and Meghan may not have the right to treat this issue as purely private. In their view, whether their children carry royal blood is not just a personal matter. It's a constitutional one. Because the monarchy is funded by the public, its legitimacy is intertwined with national identity. And therefore, some argue the public has a right to know. Now, that argument is controversial. Many people strongly disagree with it. But the fact that it's now being discussed openly, loudly, and by individuals who are taken seriously tells you just how far this conversation has escalated. And with every day that passes without an answer, those voices grow louder. Harry and Meghan built their entire public identity around the idea of speaking their truth. Transparency, refusing to hide behind palace walls or institutional silence. That was the foundation of their brand. Yet now, on the one question that may matter more than any other, they have chosen the very same palace-style silence they once criticized. And that contradiction is steadily eroding their credibility. The bigger picture, what this means for the monarchy, step back for a moment and look at the wider picture. Because this isn't just about Harry and Meghan's public image. It isn't even just about one family and its secrets. The implications here could potentially shake the British monarchy in ways that modern history has never seen. The monarchy's legitimacy, its reason for existing, its ability to command loyalty from millions, its central role in British identity rests on two pillars: bloodline and trust. If certainty about bloodline disappears, the entire foundation begins to crack. Titles, succession order, centuries of carefully preserved tradition, all of it suddenly becomes unstable. And then there is trust. Trust between the institution and the public. That trust has already been weakened over the years by royal scandals, internal feuds, departures, and public controversies. But A scandal involving the biological legitimacy of royal children would be something entirely different. This wouldn't simply be a story about arguments behind palace doors. It wouldn't be about broken relationships or professional disagreements. It would raise a far more serious question. Was the public systematically misled about the identity of members of the royal family? If that kind of deception were ever proven, it wouldn't just damage individual reputations. It would challenge the credibility of the entire institution, which is exactly why the palace, according to insiders, is moving with extreme caution. They understand the stakes. They know that one wrong move, one poorly worded statement, one document that raises more questions than it answers, could ignite a fire that burns down the entire narrative. So for now, they remain silent, allowing the fire to burn at what they hope is a safe distance. But fires have a way of spreading, and they don't always stay contained. The Sussex brand, built on sand, let's talk about the brand, because at the end of the day, that's what this entire situation is threatening to collapse. Harry and Meghan didn't simply step away from the royal family. They built an entirely new narrative around that decision, a media empire designed to present themselves as the authentic, transparent, courageous alternative to what they portrayed as a rigid and secretive institution. They signed major deals with Netflix. They sat down for the Oprah interview. Harry released one of the most personal memoirs ever written by a royal. They launched podcasts, gave high-profile speeches, and accepted awards recognizing their supposed commitment to transparency and advocacy. Every move they made revolved around a single message. We tell the truth, and we tell it publicly. That was the foundation of the brand. Honesty as identity, transparency as rebellion. But now that entire identity is being tested against their current silence, and it's not holding up well, because the couple who promised the world they would always speak their truth is now refusing to speak on the one subject where that truth would matter the most. Suddenly, the Netflix documentaries start to feel staged. The emotional confessionals begin to sound rehearsed. Even the carefully framed Instagram images of family life feel so curated that they border on fiction. As people revisit the archive with fresh eyes, armed with the questions that are now circulating, the whole structure begins to look less like authenticity and more like a carefully maintained performance. And when audiences begin to suspect they've been sold a performance, they don't simply lose interest. They get angry. Some of the most noticeable shifts are coming from former supporters, people who once defended Harry and Meghan against every tabloid attack, people who accused critics of racism, of blind loyalty to the monarchy, of protecting the establishment. Now, those same supporters are quietly stepping back. They're starting to say things like, "Something doesn't add up. I still support them, but I have questions now. Why can't they just be transparent about this one thing?" That shift from loyal defender to cautious skeptic is the most dangerous shift of all, because it's happening inside the very demographic that was supposed to be their most loyal base. And once your own base begins asking questions, no public relations strategy in the world can stop what happens next, the psychological toll, and who Harry has become beneath all the speculation, all the politics, and all the conspiracy theories. There is a deeply human story at the center of this. Prince Harry is, at his core, a man whose entire life has been shaped by trauma. He was just 12 years old when his mother died. Harry, he's just 12 years old. At that age, he was forced to stand in front of the world, trying to hold back his grief. A 12-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin as the entire planet watched. The funeral procession moved forward with Prince Charles beside him, while Harry struggled to keep himself composed under the crushing weight of global mourning. That image, that young boy in that moment, became one of the defining photographs of the late 20th century, and it shaped the man he eventually became. For years, Harry struggled against the institution he believed, at least in part, had contributed to the chaos surrounding his mother's life. Eventually, he sought therapy. He found a sense of purpose in the military. He found what he believed was love and safety with Meghan. And then he became a father. By his own repeated accounts, fatherhood changed everything. It gave his life meaning. It helped him make sense of the past. It was the reason he chose to walk away from royal life. Fatherhood became his anchor, the one thing keeping him grounded while everything else around him shifted. And now that anchor is being dragged up from the ocean floor and examined under a microscope, not just by journalists, but by commentators, social media users, and millions of strangers online who will never meet him. If you were trying to identify the one situation most likely to psychologically unravel a man already carrying decades of unresolved trauma, it would probably be this: a public challenge to the authenticity of his identity as a father. That isn't drama, that's psychology, and it explains the reports emerging from inside the Montecito home. The pacing, the sleepless nights, the endless scrolling through headlines, the mood swings, the snapping at staff, the emotional volatility. This isn't simply a media controversy. It's a personal crisis, an identity crisis. And the real tragedy hidden beneath all the royal drama is that no amount of public relations strategy, legal threats, or carefully managed silence can fix that. The only thing that could resolve it is the truth, whatever that truth may be. The road ahead, two paths, one decision. So where does this story go from here? In reality, Harry and Meghan have only two possible paths in front of them, and each one leads to a very different outcome. Path 1, they maintain the silence. They allow their legal team to continue issuing warnings. They keep the gates of Montecito closed. Their social media presence remains tightly curated. The strategy would be simple: wait for the storm to eventually burn itself out. But here's the problem. This particular storm shows no signs of fading. Tom Bower's credibility and media reach ensure that his claims won't simply disappear. They'll continue to be referenced, repeated, and amplified for months, possibly even years. Every new silence will be interpreted as confirmation that something is being hidden. Every legal warning will generate fresh headlines. Every carefully staged public appearance will be analyzed for signs that the image being presented is simply another performance. The strategy of silence may have worked in the past, but it doesn't seem to be working anymore. Too many questions have already been asked. Too many inconsistencies have already been noticed, and the public has seen too much to simply move on, which brings us to the second path. Path 2, they step forward. They address the claims directly. They provide the documentation, the clarification, and the transparency they have spent years telling the world they believe in. This path is the more difficult one. It requires a level of vulnerability that goes beyond anything either of them has shown so far. It means confronting the very rumors that are currently tearing apart their peace of mind, and doing it publicly. But it's also the only path that leads somewhere other than a slow, relentless erosion of their reputation. And at the center of both options lies a painful truth. Whatever happens next, whoever speaks first, whatever ends up being revealed or kept hidden, will ultimately determine how Harry and Meghan are remembered, not just in today's headlines, but in history books, in documentaries, in the way people talk about the monarchy decades from now. The questions surrounding Archie and Lilibet that are being asked today will not simply fade into the archives. They will remain. They will resurface. They will echo through the historical record of this era of royal history in ways neither Harry nor Meghan can fully control. The only real variable is this: will the truth, whatever that truth may be, emerge on their terms or someone else's? What you should watch next. Now here's what we're keeping a close eye on, and what you should be watching in the coming days and weeks. First, watch the palace. Any shift from Buckingham Palace's current total silence would be extremely significant. Even a subtle acknowledgement or a carefully worded non-statement would signal that the institution believes the current strategy can no longer continue. If that happens, it means something important has changed internally, something major. Second, watch Harry's public appearances. Every time he steps in front of a camera, right now, his body language tells a story no PR team can fully script. The tension is visible. The pressure is real. Pay attention to the details, his eyes, his posture, the small expressions that slip through the practiced smile. Sometimes the truth shows itself in those moments. Third, keep an eye on the media landscape. Tom Bower is not the kind of journalist who drops one bombshell and disappears. He circles back. He adds details. And when pushed back against, he often responds with more information. If his sources are as strong as his reputation suggests, there may be more revelations coming. So stay tuned. Fourth, and this is the big one, watch for documentation. Any legal filing, any court case, any publication referencing specific birth records, hospital documentation, or biological testing. That's the thread that, if pulled, could unravel everything. And finally, watch the public. Because right now, the public may be the most powerful force in this entire story. Not the palace, not the media, not even Tom Bower, but millions of ordinary people asking questions, sharing timelines, analyzing photos, and demanding answers. When public sentiment reaches a certain tipping point, it creates a pressure that neither institutions nor individuals can simply ignore. Buckingham Palace understands that. Harry and Meghan's team understands that. And according to the reports coming out of Montecito, Harry himself likely understands it too. The real question is whether anyone will act before that tipping point arrives. Where this story stands, Tom Bower has done what he has built his entire career doing. He has taken a question that powerful people would rather keep buried and dragged it into the spotlight. He has forced a conversation that Harry and Meghan have spent years trying to avoid. And he has done it at a moment when their credibility is already fragile, their support base is beginning to waver, and the institutions around them appear to be stepping back. Whether his claims are eventually proven true or completely disproven, one thing is already clear. The damage to the Sussex brand is real. The questions are already out there. The timelines are being dissected. Photographs are being compared. And speculation has moved firmly into the mainstream. Meanwhile, reports suggest Harry himself is struggling under the weight of it all. The man who once vowed to protect his family from exactly this kind of scrutiny now finds himself unable to stop it. The woman who built her public identity around speaking her truth now stands behind lawyers and silence. And the institution that once surrounded them appears to be watching from a distance, quietly preparing for whatever might come next. This is the story of a fairy tale that isn't just cracking. It's collapsing, and the world is watching it unfold in real time. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe there could be truth behind Tom Bower's claims? Do you think Harry and Meghan owe the public answers? Or do you believe this entire situation is part of a coordinated smear campaign meant to destroy what remains of their reputation? Let us know what you think. Share this video with someone who follows the royal family. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because this story is far from over. The next chapter is already beginning to unfold. And trust us, you won't want to miss what happens next. Clapperboard,